All right. Today we're going to be reviewing a little bit about Shibanu and then a couple other things, some things that people are doing maybe incorrectly in the homework. So we're going to talk about that as well. So last week you guys had to read the first three chapters of Shibanu. Those chapters included the first chapter, Guluban, Birth, and Caillou. Okay. Guluban, the very first chapter, talks about Guluban, who is actually a camel. Give me a second. I was looking for my other copy. Uh, Guluban is a camel. He has some pretty fun attributes. He can dance when Shabanu sings to him. And that makes him pretty special because she raised this camel. And she has a really close connection to Guluban the camel. All right. So it kind of shows that connection as they're introducing people in the story. Now, some of the people that you've been introduced to so far are Shabanu, her sister Pulan, her mommy, her daddy, her grandfather, and her auntie, and then her two cousins. Okay. And they've kind of talked a little bit about that. We also find out that although these girls are quite young, Pulan has gotten her first period. She's menstruating. She's started to grow her womanly parts and she is going to get married. She's currently betrothed. That means, kind of assigned to her cousin Hamir, and that's who she's going to marry. Uh, so that's kind of where you get this introduction to. You're like, oh, wow, she's like my age, not per se my age, your age, actually. And she's going to get married. This is crazy. And it kind of goes through and it talks about where they live, the Kholistan Desert, and what type of lifestyle they live. They do not have a lavish lifestyle. They live, in this area with a tobo, which is like a big watering hole. But the toba is almost empty in this chapter, and that creates a huge problem because if they don't get any water for rain, then they can't stay there, and they're going to have to move, and they don't really want to move. They don't actually want to have to leave this area with their camels until they're ready to move or at least go to the place where Pulan is going to get married at her cousin's home. So
Mrs.
there's,
Snell,
yes,
Devin has a question. He
sure.
wants to know why Poulon is getting married to her cousin.
This is actually a very common occurrence. You kept things in kind of a certain amount of bloodline, and um, how can I say this? You didn't necessarily marry your like first cousins. They were sometimes like your second or your third cousins. I mean, sometimes it was your first cousins. But with that, you kept your family unit together. And it was kind of a way to know for a fact that your daughters would be very well taken care of and your sons would also be very well taken care of because family is a strong unit here. In America, the family unit is not nearly as strong. Here, we really kind of encourage independence and leaving the nest once you get old enough. We don't encourage people to stay at home forever and take care of their parents and basically all live within one household forever. Um, that's something that we don't do. For instance, I don't live with my mom and my dad, and I don't have them living here with me. It's my husband and myself and my children. And my expectations, although I love my children now, and I will help them once they move out, but I'll be honest, my hope is that by like age 30 ish, they'll kind of be out on their own. That they're not going to be living with me forever, that they'll spread their wings and fly. Um, so it's kind of different. In their culture, the family unit is so important because they don't have some of the assistance programs that we have here. So there's no, for instance, okay, let's take our situation today. During the quarantine, there's no unemployment in like Pakistan that you like sign up for. If you are unemployed, you are homeless, you live on your own, or you basically rely on your family to help you out. Um, Here in America, we don't necessarily do that. You don't necessarily always have your aunts, uncles, cousins, great aunts, great uncles, grandparents, and everybody relying on you. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't ever happen, because of course we love our families and we want to take care of our families. And if they have a hard time, we want to help them. But what happens if all the families are having a hard time? We may use our public services. We might go to get unemployment. We might go and pick up Medicare, Medicaid. Sorry, wrong one. Medicaid. We might pick up food stamps or the link card. We might go to get those like services. And there's not a lot of those services in other countries. A lot of it is just kind of, and by that I mean the Middle Eastern countries. A lot of it is still just expected that, you know, your family will help you out. So that's kind of why. So you keep everything in the family. Interesting. Daddy, for his job, raises and sells camels. That's like the way in which their family makes money. So they have a bunch of camels and they breed them, and he keeps kind of the best of the litter. And then he continues to breed the studs. Like you find out a little, I think it's in the next chapter because I'm still talking about chapter one. But in the next chapter, you find out that Caillou and Tipu, they're fighting for like dominance. So again, you just have those camels kind of fighting for dominance, and they're going to keep one stud that's going to get all the female camels pregnant. And then they're going to have babies, and that's kind of the idea. Just kind of frequently, I mean, much like a rancher would raise livestock or something along those lines. He raises camels. And this is what he's doing. So you find out that they're going to go to something called the Sibby Fair. The Sibby Fair is basically a large gathering of men, and they go there to do business. They go there to enjoy themselves, to talk shop. And by that, I mean talk about all man issues, essentially. So government, politics, business, all of those things that are typically considered man things to discuss. Women don't necessarily have the same rights as a man in this country. So men go to kind of do that. So that kind of sums up chapter one, just in general. Then we get to chapter two. It's called Birth. And there is a problem in chapter two that Shabanu helps out with. There's this camel, it's trying to give birth, but she goes, oh my gosh, the camel can't give birth because it's been bitten by a snake, and the venom is attacking the camel and making it immobile. So she actually can't contract to get the baby out. So Shabanu has to pull the baby out. And she names this baby Mithu, this little cute baby camel, and she essentially raises Mithu because its mother dies from the snake bite. Um, so that's what chapter two is all about. Shabanu bonding with this next camel because she bonded with Guluband and she taught it Guluband how to dance. We find that out in chapter one. And then in chapter two, we find out that she had to help this baby give birth, and now she feels a connection to this baby and she bottle feeds it. And that is Mithu, the other camel. And the last chapter you guys read was Caillou. And in Caillou, if I'm pronouncing these titles right, it kind of opens up and it tells you that their daddy and Shabanu are going to go to the Sibby Fair. And this will be Shabanu's last year going to the Sibby Fair because she's going to become a woman soon. The idea is that she'll start her period and she's going to have to get married off too. And in this chapter, they discuss this whole idea about how girls in the Kholistan Desert in this area of Pakistan know that their homes are only temporary. Their long term homes are with their husbands. And it is expected that they don't go really see their moms and dads. Like they won't go back and visit. That happens very rarely. In the United States here, we think about, let's say, our holidays, doesn't matter, 4th of July, Christmas, whatever, you're going to go and maybe see the people that you're family with. So you go to your mom's side of the family and you go to your dad's side of the family and you see all these people, your cousins and all this stuff, the aunts and all that. It may not be all on the same day, but sometime during the season you try to get together with people, or maybe you're doing a Zoom meeting or a Google Meet like this just to say hi and I miss you and happy holidays. But in their culture, that's not what they think. They say once your daughter gets married off, she's a part of that husband's family. So when your daughter goes to have a baby, okay, she is part of that husband's family. And the mom's duty is to congratulate her, but really not step on any toes, because it is the mother in law's job to show her how to raise that child. And in the United States, we kind of have a different view of that. So they grow up realizing, like, wow, like I'm going to go and basically grow up until about 12 or 13 with my mom and my dad. And then in a matter of like a 2 week period, I'm going to move to where I'm going to be married to, like to my husband's house. I'm going to kind of familiarize myself with them, get married, and have to stay there. And I'm not going to go home with my mom. And imagine at your age having to go through that and starting to learn how to run a household and that kind of thing. Um, I ask you, do you know how to run a household? Do you know how to make enough dinners? Do you know how to get stains out of clothing, and not just one type of stain, but what's the difference between getting a blood stain out and a chocolate stain out? Those kind of things. So that's the kind of questions that I tend to like ask about in class. Like, how would that make you feel if you had to get married off? And this is a lot of kind of what they talk about. Pulan, I believe, cries in this chapter that she's a little sad because she's going to miss her sister, because she's not really going to get to see her sister until Shabanu marries the younger brother of Pulan's husband. So that's the idea. And then mommy and daddy know that the sisters will be together and that they'll be able to raise their children together and confide in each other. And that's kind of what they've set up. So Pulan's going to marry the oldest brother, and Shabanu's going to marry the youngest brother. And that's the whole setup of their marriage. But they worry, who's going to take care of mommy and daddy? They never had any sons. And that's the idea. Sons were supposed to take care of their parents. Once a son grew up, had children of his own, he then took care of his parents. The oldest son took care of his parents. That it was the requirement. So think about that. Is your father the oldest child in your father's family? Because if he is, he would be required in that country to take care of his parents. So they kind of talk about all of these different things culturally. All right. And they're starting to pack up to go to the Sibby Fair. They're packing up the different things that they need, the food that they're going to need to cook while they're there. They're packing up the camels and getting them harnessed correctly. They kind of have to put these nose plugs in so they can guide the camels around. So they kind of, talk about that. And then all of a sudden, we realize that in this process of getting the camels ready, that Kalyu and Tipu go to fight. And they're kind of arguing and they're fighting for dominance within the kind of camel group to see which one is actually going to impregnate the female camels. It kind of starts off with Tipu kind of going after kind of a food item of Kalu's, and then kind of Tipu's interested in a girl, and it kind of steamrolls from there. Well, Shabanu is told to stay away, to get away, right? But then she realizes that baby Mithu is in the mix and he doesn't know what to do, and she doesn't want him to get hurt. So she goes after Mithu. But here's the thing, camels, once they get into this stud match to determine who's going to be dominant, they're like animals. They see nothing else. They have like one thing in mind, and that's it. And it's to kill the other camel. So Shabanu kind of gets in the mix of this. And essentially, if she gets kicked by a camel, she could die. She could get killed. And she didn't pay attention to Daddy. And she disobeyed him. And he is angry that she has disobeyed him. And she kind of thinks about this, afterwards. Shabanu kind of thinks sometimes she feels that Murad, the person that she will be, or she is betrothed to, is going to own her kind of like daddy and treat her that way. And she worries about that because she's like, is this really all I have for my life? That I have to be owned by another person, that I don't get to make my own decisions? So that's kind of the summary of the first 3 chapters as she goes forth. This week, you are reading the next set of chapters. You're reading up through 8, because I think it's 4, 5 on today, 6, 7 tomorrow, and on Thursday it's 8. Okay. Now, here's the thing I really need to talk to you guys about. It is really obvious when you guys have not read the chapters. Really obvious. Some of the answers, I'll be honest, make me chuckle because I think, oh, they didn't read the chapters at all. I posted some of those answers, but I'll be honest, that doesn't even nearly reach the breadth of the crazy answers that I've received for some of these questions. When I asked a question about why do Tipu and Kalu fight, I would say about 30% of the 7th graders gave me some sort of answer that made it sound like these camels were human. For instance, a student said something like, well, Tipu said something mean to Kalu. Camels talk now. Those kind of things. So making it sound like these people are human, and that's not going to work. So please make sure that you're listening to these books. If you have a question about them, I have the actual book sitting here with me. And honestly, if we were in class, you'd have this book too. I'd also give you the ability to listen to it online, but you'd have the book and be able to read it online. Unfortunately, we just didn't have time to hand out the books prior to leaving the school that Friday. It was kind of a crazy mess. So please listen to the books. If you have a question about a question I'm asking, I have all the questions. I've actually created them. Like this is me. Like I've created all of these questions. So a lot of these questions you won't just find by searching the internet. And it's also really apparent when somebody copies something from the internet. So please make sure that you're reading this book. Reach out to your classmates, your friends. Say, like in this chapter for this question, I heard this, but I don't really understand. What are they talking about? If there's a word you don't understand, by all means, reach out to myself, Miss Williams, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Williams, and ask what those words are. Google search it. I mean, pause the video, turn on the closed captioning, and you should be able to like highlight over the words, copy it, and paste it into a Google search engine in a new window, and it should be able to give you the definition. There are lots of different things you can do, but you need to make sure that you're kind of reading to understand this book. I'm also going to elaborate and tell you need to be taking some notes here and there. I'm not saying write pages of notes. I don't want you to write pages of notes, but main characters, kind of what happened every chapter, that kind of thing. Just a couple lines. It doesn't have to be just something to jog your memories for when we do that project at the end of our unit, which will be in May. And that's a far way away to remember a whole bunch of stuff. So there's that. The last thing I need to talk about. Something that I've noticed on my Google search engine, and some of you may notice on yours, is that your Google search engines might be messed up. By that, I mean that it is not searching in the correct way. And I'm going to kind of explain to you. So, do me a favor, go on right now, go onto your Google and put in like a search engine, type in snowflake. I'm going to do it too on a different computer, but I'm going to do it. Click on images, okay? Click on images. You're going to go snowflake images. I hope everybody has gotten to that point. Now, underneath, it should say in a list, you should see the Google search engine that says snowflake. It should say all with a magnifying glass, then images, news, videos, shopping, more across the top. Then there's a second line. It says size, colored, and then it says labeled for reuse in blue. That's the problem. You will not find anything that I'm having you search for if it says labeled for reuse. You have to click on it. Click on the first line, which says not filtered by license. And then all of a sudden, you'll get a whole bunch of new pictures. Now, all of a sudden, you've got snowflake pictures coming out your snowflakes. But you will have to do that every time you search in something different if your computer is kind of messed up like mine. So on my computer, I see that I can choose clip art snowflakes, cartoon snowflakes, transparent snowflakes, vector snowflakes. I don't know if your search is the exact same, but it should have a list of different types. The crazy thing is if I click cartoon and I wait for it to load, unfortunately, sometimes it will go back to that labeled for reuse, and I have to literally click not labeled for reuse.
So, Mrs. Schnabel, mine is coming up normal. Like, I'm not seeing that second line you're talking about. I do have the sections as soon as I search snowflake, the cartoon,
right,
and other ideas, and I'm thinking some of the students are getting that as well.
Some are, but some aren't. The problem is that some of the computers are searching just fine for some reason, and other kids are having that problem. I don't even know what got clicked on or what got clicked off, because I can do a search on my home computer and the pictures that come up are completely different than what's on my Google computer. So when they're searching for things, like one of the things that I realized was last week, you guys had to search for a toba. Interestingly enough, there's a lake toba in India. I think it's in India. I got a lot of pictures of Lake Toba, but it's not a toba in the middle of a desert, because the problem, I think, was that was one of the only few pictures of a toba that came up where it said, where underneath the labeled for reuse. Once you clicked off of that and you went into not filtered, then all of a sudden you got pictures of deserts and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, if that's happening to your computer, because we all know that computers act differently, and sometimes we click on a setting somehow, and I don't know how to change that setting, to get it to click into the other one all the time. So that's kind of one of those things. So yeah, that's the problem that I'm kind of seeing. Yeah, see, because I see chases when I put in the pog plant, that happened to me. And I think it's going to depend on what you search, because, or maybe your personal search engine. And some of you guys are going to notice the problem, for instance, like the pog plant, because nothing came up. If a random picture comes up, you go, oh, that must be it. That doesn't mean that it's it. So you have to make sure that it matches the definition. So if it says a piece of fabric used as a head covering for Shadar, you better show me fabric being used as a head covering. not just a random piece of fabric. Because I'm not kidding you when I say one of the pictures I received was Mrs. Claus with her Santa hat on. It made me laugh, but I didn't give them credit. I was like, that's not a shadar. So, are there any other questions at this point in time? Remember to take notes. Remember to, you can't just simply say, I can't find that image. I actually have gotten several kids asking me if they can just put, I can't find it. No, you can't say, I can't find it. You don't get to just search for 1 minute and then be like, so you have to keep trying and reach out to me or Miss Williams if you have a problem. Anything else? Because otherwise I am done. Man, that's like record time.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I am done for the day. I hope you guys have a great day. Please make sure to read and look at the questions, and I will see you next week.